Good morning, beautiful people of the Center for Spiritual Living. I am Edward Viljoen, and I am here to share today's message with you. And I want to start by acknowledging that it is December 1st, and which is the reason for the red ribbon I'm wearing, which is a universally recognized symbol of the observation of World AIDS Day. And so I want to read to you from our president a proclamation. I'm going to read the beginning of it and the end of it. Each year on World AIDS Day, we come together as a global community to fight a devastating pandemic. We remember the friends and loved ones we have lost, stand with the estimated 35 million people living with HIV/AIDS, and renew our commitment to preventing the spread of this virus at home and abroad. If we channel our energy and compassion into science-based results, an AIDS-free generation is within our reach. We will succeed, but it's not over yet. In memory of the loved ones we have lost, and on behalf of our family members, friends, and fellow citizens of the world addressing the HIV/AIDS situation, we resolve to carry on this observation and end stigma and discrimination towards people living with the disease. At this pivotal moment, let us work together to bring this pandemic to an end. Now, therefore, I, Barack Obama, President of the United States of America, by virtue of the authority vested in me by the Constitution and by the laws of the United States, do hereby proclaim December 1, 2013 as World AIDS Day. I urge the governors of the states and the various regions of our nation and also the American people to join me in appropriate activities to remember those who have lost their lives to AIDS and to provide support and comfort to those living with the disease. And so when the president asks us to do that, I do it. Yeah. And you know, at our center, there are appropriate methods of support available for free on an ongoing basis, like our weekly grief support group, or our upcoming remembrance service for anyone who has passed away in the past 12 months, as well as our free prayer and telephone ministry. But today also we're going to look at a way that perhaps we can bring the observation into our own personal home and our own personal lives, and I'll get to that in a moment, by introducing that our topic is creating sacred space, which makes it a perfect topic for this day. By sacred space, I mean the time and or activity and or place that we set aside to refuel, to reconnect to our spiritual source. And by creating spiritual space, we mean mindfully going about the task of making sure that space is available, not letting it happen accidentally, stumbling upon it. It's actually going to the task of making something available where I can refuel and reconnect. A long while ago, one of the recommended books of the month was by Uriah Mountain Dreamer. I can't remember the title of the book, but I can remember one of the stories in the book. Isn't that the way of stories? A story will stay with you for much longer than a lecture will. And in the story, she talks about a movement workshop that she was part of. And in the movement workshop, the students were instructed that each were given a yellow cross, an X, where they was their home base, that when they were standing on it, they could breathe. Anywhere else in the room, they had to move. So the idea was to move in the movement workshop and do your thing, but when it was time to breathe, you had to come back to where X marked your spot, and that's where you breathe. So in the beginning, students experienced a little bit of anxiety, always checking how far can I go away from the spot. But over time, when you know that you can get to your spot and breathe again, it gives one the courage to venture further, to go a little further, because you can start testing the limits and come back eventually to home and to your breath. And the idea is that no matter how far you and I roam It's so important for us to come back to that place where we can breathe and to come back to it frequently, like on a schedule, like on a regular basis, because that's what practice means. Regularly, on a schedule, come back to it so that we can venture further out into the world and do things perhaps we dared not dream when we didn't know there was a place where we could breathe. And over time, human beings have gone about the task of creating places for this very purpose of reconnecting with spirituality, building great monuments and churches and temples and national parks. And I'm of the opinion that over the years, when so many of us reconnect in the same place, it does something for the place. I mean, I might be making it up, but that's my feeling. I remember when I was in Paris, France, and I was at the Notre Dame Cathedral, and then later at Chartres at the cathedral. Walking in there, I felt like I was walking into a thick soup of memory of so many people who before me had been in that very spot and reconnected with their own spirituality. So many of us can't travel to Paris or to wherever it is, but we can bring our spirituality to life in our very own home, in a space, or through the means of a regular activity. And how we do that, the clue to it, is hidden in the word sacred, which is related to the word sacrifice, which means given up for a specific purpose. For only one specific purpose. That's what sacred means. It's set aside for no other use but this one. I was thinking about this and how sometimes couples have a sacred moment set aside, maybe on a weekly schedule, in the form of a date night, in which each person in the couple has to give up some part of their autonomy for the good of the greater whole. One couple told me that the way they did it was, on one week, it was one person in the couple was his turn to say, I want to do this, and then the other partner had the agreement to full-heartedly agree to do it and be fully present for it, even if they didn't like it. And then the next week it was her turn to say, I want to do this, and then it was his turn to full-heartedly agree to do it. And they told me that they thought that this was the glue that carried them through 50 years of beautiful marriage. And I think I really believe this, that through that personal sacrifice, this moment in time, which they described to me as being more holy to them, this date night, than church. I believe that. And you know, it is the case that individuals who may not be in a romantic relationship benefit also from a high holy date with themselves, and I'm talking about the self of God in them, a date that is holier to us than church, that we come to as something very important. We come to our X marks the spot, to commune with and be reminded of the presence that dwells within us and to drink deeply in the breath of spiritual life. I learned how important this was also from my other guru, my cat Andrew, who, when learning about how to provide for a healthy environment for a cat, it requires many things. Cats require a lot, not least of which is alone time. Maybe you are a cat co-inhabitor, and you know that sometimes your cat will have a do not disturb sign above it, right? See, I didn't know that because I used to always go up to Andrew and touch him because he looked so darn cute when he was in that mode. And I learned afterwards that that was counterproductive because what he needed for his health and sanity was a space and a time where he knew he would not be disturbed, where he could be alone and he could do whatever it is that cats do when they are in do not disturb mode. I didn't know that. And I didn't know how important it was for me too, to have a time that is not disturbed, where I can breathe. And you might guess by now from our whole year's theme, practice, 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 that the clue to creating sacred space is in the regularity, in the rhythm that we set for ourselves. Not set by somebody else or by a religious doctrine, by your own self. Make a practice of it so that it's not random. So that whenever you touch whatever your X is, you'll be reminded of what is in you and have the renewed confidence to go even further than where you went before. Today's topic is all about creating a form of sacred space in your own home. I like to create sacred space in my home because it's the place where I spend the most time, rather than make it at the office. And, at home is going to be where I do all these other practices that we talk about. If I'm going to be meditating, it's most likely going to be at home. If I'm going to be doing forgiveness work, it's most likely going to be at home. And that really does require comfort, mindfulness, allowance, tenderness. If I'm going to be doing journaling, it's most likely going to be at home. So I like to have sacred space in my home that helps me connect, that reminds me of what's inside of me. And it doesn't have to be a whole room. Although, as I was thinking about this, it occurred to me to think about this idea. Can you imagine with me what it might be like if your entire home and everything in it was a clear reflection of your spiritual belief in atmosphere and aesthetic? I mean, what a thought. I thought of this because I had a friend whose husband was diagnosed with a very aggressive disease. And as part of the coping with the disease, they decided together to move from their very beautiful large home into a smaller, more manageable living environment. But as they moved to that environment, they realized they couldn't take everything with them. So they went through the process of mindfully observing, looking at every single thing and asking themselves the question together as a couple, do you absolutely love it? Because if they couldn't say a wholehearted yes, they didn't take it. And so as a result, this new home that they made together, where they lived out together the end time of his life, was like a cathedral, a chapel of holiness. And everything in it spoke to them of their love. I thought about that because as the end of the year comes up for me, I noticed that my living space starts to show signs of clutter. It's like it's a vortex, just pulls things in. And I'm not talking about grubbiness or untidiness or dirtiness, because living spaces go like that as you use and clean and I'm just talking about the unnecessary items that are not in their right place when they are in my home. And so I see at this time of year, it's a really good time for me to scan what is in my home, what's landed in my home, and to ask the question, do you really love this? Because in most cases, I discover I need far less in my home than what the ads tell me. In class, sometimes, and by the way, our classes are starting to enroll right now, so it's a good time to think about what you want to be doing in the winter months. You could be learning about spirituality, and in actually a few of the classes, we have the practice where one student one at a time, is asked to bring in and create what you could call an altar at the center or at the front of the class as a way of focusing our attention from wherever we've been. So the student is asked to bring items that they really love, that reflect their spiritual journey, their belief, and to put them in display in front of the class. And then before class gets going, that student has the opportunity to describe every single item on there. And I'll tell you something. There's nothing more holy than listening to somebody tell about the symbology, the symbolism of each item that is holy to them. It just has the effect of changing the mood of the class deeply. And you know, that's a way of making sacred space in your home, to set aside a place, call it your altar, where you mindfully put things that represent your spirituality. And it can be as complex as you like, and it can be as simple as you like. Indeed, if you want to have an example of this in action, come to the World Peace Meditation on the last day of the year. It's the morning of the last day of the year, not the evening, the morning of the last day of the year at 4 a.m., where literally hundreds of us gather together to sit and consider the idea, what would it be like if this world were completely peaceful? And then members of the center create an altar where they bring items of spiritual significance that speak the message of peace, images of the world, of the earth, of nature, of lights, and they put it together and we sit and let the altar tell us its story. So you can see an example of that in action, or you can make one in your own home. The instructions are very simple. The very first and most important step is to clean the space. You know, get the grubbiness out of the way, vacuum, dust, wipe down, prepare the area. Oh, there's something so important about entering into this activity in a space that has been made ready to receive you. And then the second important step is to say a prayer. Now, you know, in our tradition, we say a prayer not to change the space or to change the environment. Nothing outside of us is changed that isn't changed inside of us. So I say the prayer to get my attention into the right place. That's what the prayer is for, so that when I engage in this activity, it becomes more than a creative project. It is the expression of my mind coming to rest on my ex. I was remembering that, you know, it doesn't have to be stationary in your home. Indeed, my sacred expressions are starting to spill out into other areas, and you can have a mobile, a portable version of your heart's expression, your altar. I remembered this when we were traveling to New Zealand together, and said to the travelers, you don't even have to have brought something with you. You can bring things from the outside in nature and place them in some part in your hotel and spend a moment there to remember, to breathe. So I brought some of the things from my home to show you how I might go about creating sacred space. And if it were being made for the first time, sometimes I would go through the process of what might be called a purification. You know, sometimes I'll use water, because water is a symbol both of spirit and of emotion and purity. And I'll pour it into a bowl like this, because the act of pouring it is a ritual that already starts to connect me to the slowing down of the process. This particular one is standing on a trinity of Ganesh statues, and I light a candle which represents fire, again purification, also illumination. So I think about the things that these stand for as I do it. I haven't even got to the spiritual practice yet. I'm just getting ready. You know, sometimes I'll light incense to represent fire and purification. This is a great incense burner. I got it right here at Stepping Stone's bookstore. And it's great because it's got a descending incense stick, you know. I'm not going to light this because I know some people are allergic to the burning smoke. And I'm mindful of that in my own home. And sometimes what I'll use as a substitute for the fragrance experience is essential oils. I like to learn what the essential oil represents, and then that way when I put a drop of it in the very gently heating water, it doesn't destroy the essential oil, but the fragrance lingers in the air and it'll bring my attention back. Just in the same way that a bell will. You know, sometimes we'll ring a bell, and the power of a bell or a gong is that it has the ability to stretch out into time, and you listen to it and you can't tell when it's finished, if it's still hanging in the air. And that reminds me of eternity and infinity. And now I only need one ring of the bell. And already I can feel my mind and my emotions, they're converging on this point. And then the creativity comes. I bring the things that are going to help me focus. Like, for example, this one is one of the important spots in my home. It's a carved relief of Ganesh, hand-painted. It's very unique. And I have it in the most important part in my home because it was a very, very precious possession to the one who owned it. And when she gave it to me, I knew there was no words that could ever adequately express what I felt. And I have it in the center place because it reminds me of how important generosity is and the power of giving. I have my Ganesha there. And then what I'll do is I'll bring other icons of religion. I've got, Mary over here. And of course, from my Catholic background, I've got St. Christopher. And I've got Buddha over here from a temple in Thailand. And I've even got a Celtic knot, and I bring them out. And some people will say to me, well, Edward, aren't you concerned that you're worshiping graven images? I say to them, no. And that's all I have to say. It's the 21st century, I asked the Balinese guides about the statues they have everywhere. Are you concerned that people will think you're worshiping graven images? And they said, no, it's like a photograph. Don't you carry a photograph around when you're traveling to remind you of loved ones? And when you pull the photograph, the full essence of that person is with you. It's exactly what it is. So I have no concern whatsoever about all the variety of gods, goddesses, icons, symbols, and things in my home at all. In fact, I loved the idea of the photographs so well that that's what I do. I bring photographs of people into my home, like Reverend Marilyn Mooney, who passed away several years ago now. Because she looks at me in my study from one of my temple areas, because she reminds me of dedication and love and service and selflessness, long-suffering. And because it's World AIDS Day, I would certainly bring out photographs. For example, the very first person in my life who passed away from AIDS, I certainly would bring that out. There are all sorts of things I probably won't have the time to get to, but I bring them out. And this one is it's just beads. And the woman who was wearing them, I said to her, I like those beads. And she took them off of her head. And she gave them to me, and they were very precious to her. And there's a whole story that goes with it. And I always have it at my altar because now that she's passed on, it reminds me to not hold too tightly to things that I think are precious. So every time I go to Bali or India, I get some super holy, blessed, supercharged beads, and then somebody goes and says, I like that, and I say, ugh. There are some weird things that I put on my altar, but, that's me. You're going to have your own weird things on your altar. There's no place in my home where there isn't a copy of the Bhagavad Gita. It's in every nook and cranny, almost superstitiously so. See, I don't mind confessing. And the Tao Te Ching is usually there. And I put them there because I can just look at it now and be reminded of the content. And bring my grandmother in the form of this elephant because she owned it and she loved elephants. And she taught me everything I know about kindness. And this, strangely enough, is on my altar. It's a broken head of an angel from a garden ornament. And I'll tell you why it's there. It's because it was one of the most precious gifts I ever received. It used to be part of a much larger, very gaudy statue that was a marked down gift that was given to me. It still had the marked down tag on and said, now only $1.99. And it was very gaudy, and actually Chris gave it to me, and the reason why I loved it so much is because even after Andrew jumped on it and broke it, it reminded me that love has got nothing to do with a price tag or possessions or external references. So every time I look at that, it tells the story of friendship. And so it goes with the various things that I have here. I like to light lots of candles. This one I also got from Stepping Stones bookstore. It's in the shape of a lotus. I like it because of what the lotus stands for. And at some point in my putting it together, I might pull out these two candelabras and light them. It's a kind of way of getting me to the point to start. You see, because all of this while has just been the preparation. And in so doing and telling myself what it means, I'm getting to a point of stillness that we spoke about in the affirmation earlier. A point of stillness where I am much more inclined to be able to breathe. And I'll sit in a chair that's about the same level as this, and I will look and let the items there tell me their story. And then I will sit quietly. And then I will do my spiritual practice, whether it's journaling or praying or meditating. And then I will sit some more. So this month, I invite you to consider creating a space in your home or in your office. Or if you're in Bali, you could even do it in your car. They do it on their dash, They create a representation of their faith on the dashboard of their car. Something that represents your spirituality deep inside of you. And then make a date with yourself, a high holy date to visit it every day. And in your visiting, you can ritualize it. Light a candle every time. Or you can develop it by agreeing with yourself to bring something new every single day over the next 30 days to put there. And then be open to the instruction of what is in all of this by sitting there. See, if you don't know what spiritual practice to do, it's okay. Just sit there and look. And something beautiful will happen. Why I think this is a good time to do it and why I think it is important is because right now in the world, in this particular month, in this particular season, there is a powerful and incessant and terrific pressure on us to measure ourselves by purchases and gifts and activities. Powerful. And this will help me, and maybe you too, stay awake to what truly matters. Later on, after the service is done, if you care to come up and have a look at all the temple paraphernalia, you're welcome to do that. But I ask that you not handle anything while you're up here, largely because the balance is precarious, and I'd prefer not to see anything go crashing down. But for now, let us take a moment to breathe in together as I return to the words of the affirmation that we started with. A great stillness steals over me, and a great calm quiets my whole being as I realize the presence of Spirit within me. In this presence, God's presence, I am still. And so with those words, then, we enter into the practice of prayer, acknowledging each in our own way that presence, the Creator, in whatever form is most suitable for our prayer. Whether we use words such as the divine or God, or qualities such as eternal and infinite. We mean the same thing. We mean that which cannot be described, and yet it is our source from which we are made. And so we are celebrating today that its nature is in us. Its creativity is our expression of making, of doing and being. Its love is in us as our capacity to love one another and to be compassionate, and we celebrate that today, remembering that we have within our means to carry with us and to create in any place and at any time an X, a sacred space for us to retreat to refuel, so that we may take our place in the community of beings, refreshed, renewed, and alive. And together we say, and so it is.